welcome to episode 55 of the Alfa Romeo Driver Podcast, brought to you by the Alfa Romeo Owners Club. I'm Guy Swarbrick, and with me this afternoon to talk about the upcoming Alfa Romeo Championship, I have two friends of the podcast, series coordinator Andy Robinson and Bianco Motosports Supremo Paul Plant. Good afternoon, gentlemen.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, guys.
So, Andy, we're getting close to the first round of the season. There's a slightly different look to, I say there's a slightly different look to the calendar. The last few years, it's been different every year for lots of reasons beyond our control. But talk us through the season's plans for this year.
Okay, well, there's always a complex exercise that works its way down from circuit owners to, through the various layers of motorsport, with dates being offered to different organizing clubs and all that stuff. So, in effect, you wind up with not too much choice, because once they've done all their calculations, 750 Motor Club, and tries to fit people around, it's difficult to get it modified significantly. You might get a race meeting or two changed. But we start the season at the end of April, the meeting at Silverstone National Circuit, which is the season's opener. We then move on to Croft in May, Angle season July. Then there's Festival Italia in August, which is always probably our biggest event. At the Anglesey meeting, we're guests of the Ferrari Owners Club, as we were last year, and it was very successful. We got a good grid at Croft last year. They treated us very well, I thought. Festival Italia, as I say, in August. And then we move over to Cadwell Park, and then finally at Alton Park. The one thing you might notice about that, it's quite northern biased. 4 of the 6 rounds or meetings, I should say, and a lot of our drivers are based in the south. So we'll be giving it financial incentives for people to enter the more far-flung meetings, specifically those at Croft and Anglesey. If people do the meeting, it costs you £100 to join ARCA, the Alfa Championship Association. We basically refund that twice. You can't refund it twice. It's like a bonus payment or a reward for entering those meetings. We have been more successful this year than we have for a few years at getting significant sponsorship, not least from the Owners Club, for which we are profoundly grateful, but also through High Tech, Yokohama, Black and Rounds, and also John Billingsley, one of our drivers, his new media company, which is called Axis Shift. He has also come up with a very, very helpful package of measures. What we like to do is use that money to make it less expensive for drivers to race. So we're hoping to be in a position where we refund another £100 or whatever sum, particularly at Festival Italia, where the circuit hire costs are significantly more from MSV than they are for the other circuits, to mitigate the additional cost of entering there. So what we're committed to doing is helping the drivers financially, if we can, within the limits of the sponsorship package that we've put together. So other things we have to pay for, of course, like trophies and all the rest. But we're in quite a good position financially. So anything we can do to make it easier for drivers to enter, more affordable, that's what we'd like to do. That's a top priority for using that sponsorship money.
Brilliant. And has John used some of his budget to actually put some stickers on a car this year, Paul, or is he in a plain white car again?
Let's not be silly now. John, he likes the minimalistic approach to the car. So I don't think it'll have any extra stickers on.
The livery does add weight, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. This is true. But it's, to be fair, I quite like the cars that do have lots of stickers on. But actually, when you look at the photographs that people like yourself take, John's car's painted in the particular white they have with the minimalistic stickers. I do actually think looks pretty good.
They do look.
It's to be fair to him, although he probably won't stick anything else on there. At least it does actually look good, and it's doesn't look like a shed that he's just driving around.
That's true. Although his liveries in the virtual racing championship was stunning.
Yeah, the livery for his kind of motorsport name, Vanquish Motorsport. To be fair, I've known John for a decade now. Nearly every car that he's had, whether it's online, virtual, or racing, he's done that Vanquish livery, and it looks brilliant. It really does look good. It's a shame that he hasn't done it, but maybe if he hears the podcast, he might think, well, maybe I'll get it done, because they do look. It looks brilliant. It just really suits most of the cars. It's really good. It
does look really good. We said earlier on they're all double headers, but they're not all 2-day meetings, are they? So Silverstone is 1 day.
1 day. Yeah.
Brands Hatch, as always, is one day.
And so is Alton Park. The other three are 2 days: Croft, Anglesey, and Cadwell.
Yeah.
The good thing about the Anglesey, one of the good things about the Anglesey meeting is we race on coastal circuit on one day and the international circuit on the other, and there's separate qualifying sessions for each of those. So I think it's a long way away, of course, to get to for some people, but it's a marvelous circuit, I think. So hoping we'll get good grids.
Hopefully Croft will be a little bit drier and warmer than it was last year.
Yes, that would be nice. Yes, we could ask for that. Yeah.
They're all in the north. None of them are going to be dry and warm.
It did rain at Festival Italia last year, didn't it? Was that the year before? No, it was the year before.
Yeah. It did clear up as well, fortunately.
It did, yeah. And then got wetter again towards the end of the day, I think.
We've got 20 registrations now, as of this morning. 7 modified class, 6 V6 and 6 twin sparks. And we know there's more to come. Paul can probably update us from the Bianco perspective or anything else that he is aware of. But I'm expecting at least 5 more drivers to register before the first round. And we have 4 completely new drivers, which is good.
Yeah. Amazing, really. Fantastic move.
It is. And you mentioned the V6 class, just snuck that in there, which is new for this year. So tell us a little bit about the thinking behind the V6 class.
Well, it was kind of a campaign by the V6 drivers, to be honest, which generated momentum over a couple of years until we felt it was difficult to continue denying to implement it, given the weight of opinion. So the reasoning behind it is as a power trophy class, there were a lot of driver concerns about the fact that the V6s or any other cars could, simply by spending loads of money on trick stuff, become more competitive that way and make it difficult for other drivers to compete who had less disposable income, shall we say, to invest in the cars. So we tied the spec down quite tightly. Panel member Graham Seeger coordinated a lengthy and detailed consultation process all through last season to arrive at a final set of regs to try and make sure we didn't lose any existing drivers for a start, which we seem not to have done. So that's encouraging. And we hope it'll become a bit like Twin Spark Cup, very evenly matched cars, very close racing, perhaps a bit less spread out than they have been.
So what is the basic framework for that? How modified are the V6 cars allowed to be?
Not very. Standard brakes. You can remap the engine up to a point. Wheels and tires are specified. Can't modify the bodywork, etc., etc. I don't have all the details in front of me, but it is pretty tightly.
Right. I think it's essentially the suspension is of the same design orientation as the Twin Spark Cup in terms of a road type shock absorber, although it's a Coney Sport type. Springs have to be of a standard type, although upgraded. I believe they're actually going to be provided by Revs Italia, so that all the cars will have the same suspension.
Yeah.
In terms of the brakes being standard, it is the 330mm brakes with four-pot Brembos is the maximum you're allowed to have, with obviously upgraded pads and what have you. Gearboxes have to remain standard. Engines have to remain standard. It's very similar to the Twin Spark Cup or the old what was Class C. But the major differences I see are that now in that particular class you are allowed to run an aftermarket ECU and wiring loom, and also an aftermarket pedal box, as that's the spec actually that most of the cars that are suitable for the class currently have. So rather than making everyone reinvest in something, it was used as that kind of standpoint. So it provides essentially a car that it should be cost effective to run, not as cost effective as Twin Spark Cup, but then if you're going faster, then you should expect to pay more, I guess.
Yeah.
The cars currently run slicks and wets, although I think Andy is in discussion about moving them over to a control tyre going forward, the same as the Twin Spark Cup, which will again, level the field of what the cars can do, which I think is a great idea personally. So we'll see how that develops. But as Andy was saying, there's not really a great deal that you can do. It's designed to, keep the cars equal, budget friendly, and most important, fun and competitive.
The other thing to mention is that there are minimum weight stipulations which are lower for 3 litre and 2.5 litre cars.
Okay.
So we're trying to encourage those cars with those slightly smaller capacity engines into the class. We don't know if the calculations are exactly right in terms of competitiveness, but I'm hoping we'll get the opportunity to test that.
Well, Paul knows how disastrously bad my attempts at handicapping through weight are. And I think the only conclusion I've ever come to is you can't get them exactly right.
No, probably not. But,
just try and limit how wrong they are.
Yeah. So
some thought has gone into it though. So fingers crossed it'll be there. But I think that there is a little bit of fluidity that's been built in with the way the rules are worded. That if it does transpire that somebody turns up with a car that should be somewhere where we expect, and it transpires that actually it's not, then between the panel, the discussions can be had to make amendments, to bring everyone into spec.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I may not have been paying attention, but I didn't hear any current entries in Power Trophy. Is that because the V6 has kind of taken all of those on, or is that still an open class?
Well, there is one Power Trophy car.
One at the moment.
Which is a 33.
Right.
One thing I'd like to see is, it wasn't so many years ago when there were loads of 33s racing. And now there's only there's Tom Waits, Keith Waits' sons, and Brian Trubb, of course, has a modified car, though, which is up for sale at the moment. But I'd love to see some 33s coming back into race. So we did have Simon Hampton race with us he normally races elsewhere, but he raced with us at Festival Italia. It'd be nice to see a few more of those out.
Yeah. And I think that we may well be getting close to the point where there are as many 33 race cars sitting in garages as there are 33 road cars left.
Well, yes, you don't see many on the road, that's for sure.
No.
Is it true? We actually have two in today, believe it or not.
Really?
Yeah, it's a very, very peculiar thing. When we get vehicles booked in that we don't see for ages, it's as if they're all on a forum somewhere and they all decide to book their vehicles in on the same week.
Well, that's good.
But there are lots out there. But even expanding that slightly from what Andy was saying, that the Puntos that regularly join in with us, although they've been quiet in terms of what they've done over the last sort of year, those cars are all legible. There's probably a dozen of those Puntos in the UK racing around, and it may just transpire that if they're sitting there and thinking they haven't got to compete against GTAs or the bigger engine cars, that we may see more of those. But I think that the ethos has shifted slightly, that it is a 4-cylinder class now, and that the power to weight is of a level where you don't need to have a severely modified car to actually be able to go out there and win. And hopefully that provides some attraction for the old 33s. Even other cars that have the 2-litre engine, whether they're 75s or Alfettas, the Puntos, or if people want to take their twin spark cup car onto slicks and wets, they can go in there and still be reasonably competitive.
Yeah. And it was always nice to watch the Puntos having fun, gamely hanging on to the Power Trophy cars. But it'd be nice to see them in a closer battle.
They would race every meeting if they could. It's just been budget restrictions, I think, that have been difficult over the lockdown period and so on. But we'd love to see him back more often. So
another thing that we've seen a lot of online over the last couple of months, Paul, is the development of your Giulietta, which I think made its debut in the championship in Festival Italia last year, but has had quite a lot of work to it over the winter. Tell us a little bit more about what you've been doing with that.
With the class going forward and the Giulietta and the Mito, obviously there's been a couple of Mitos that have raced over the years, both I should say, to varying sort of specs. And I think if the championship is to move forward, it needs to have a plan in place to accommodate the more modern cars. But the one thing that we kind of felt with the Twin Spark Cup was that although it's a very strict set of rules, if five people build 5 cars, all 5 of them are quite different.
Yeah.
So what we decided to do this time, because there isn't really other cars that race and need to accommodate, we've started with a blank sheet. We've leaned on Dave Petty at DP Motorsport for the spec that he's done with the Mito that he built, and kind of designed a specification that what the ultimate goal is that if 5 people build cars, all 5 will be the same, because they will only be allowed to run the specific parts supplied by the championship.
Yeah.
But the weakness in doing that is if you don't test the vehicle, you could potentially design a bit of a melon that nobody actually wants to go and use.
Yeah.
So rather than sort of testing it in the championship as such, we've been testing it at much longer races and events, simply for reliability, to understand how will the car fare across 500 miles of racing use, rather than the shorter races that we do, and also to try bits and pieces out. So as the year's gone on, we've had 3 different types of wishbones, in the hope that we will actually be able to make a tubular wishbone that will it will certainly give the feeling of more of a race car than where the twin spark cars are, but at a price point that is actually the same as buying a standard wishbone. So you're getting an upgrade in terms of what the car can do with not a huge amount of adjustability, but something that allows people to tinker.
Yeah.
But for the price point of what a new one would cost you anyway. So we've done that. We've played with a couple of exhaust systems. We've played with a few intercoolers. The roll cage spec is done and dusted. As I said, we're just waiting for Dave at DP Motorsport to get those to us. We've got a couple on order with him that we're waiting for, so we can build a couple more cars. All the cars will run a Quaife diff, just because by the time we're finished, we're hoping the car is going to be around 230 horsepower.
Yeah.
Or 220 perhaps, and without a diff, certainly in the wet, they just become a bit lively. So we've sort of added a diff into the spec. We've tested 2 types of suspension so far that are ones that you can buy off the shelf that are quite widely used within the Giulietta sort of community for people that modify cars. But we've discovered that although they're pretty good, and from a price point they're pretty good, they're just not quite there for motorsport use, really.
Yeah.
So we actually have a company currently making a complete new set of coilovers, which will go onto the market for general sale for anybody, but far more track biased and have the adaptability that we can actually run motorsport springs that are very cheap and cost effective to dial in the specification of the car. So that in theory, if you were to go down the route of a Mito or a Giulietta, you spend, in racing terms, not a great deal of money, but actually will have a car that has been tested, been proven, had some design tweaks to make it, very competitive. And actually what we're seeing at the moment with the lap times, certainly, at the last meeting we was at, the cars, as we're getting better and understand it more, are performing, really, really well, and actually some really fantastic lap times.
Yeah.
We're hoping that, once it's done, people won't, wish that things were different, although that might be inevitable.
That's definitely inevitable.
Yeah, with the Twin Spark Cup, lots of people say, if we could just put a camshaft in and have a bit more power and things like that. So we've sort of gone on the basis, well, if as long as it's not expensive in the first instance, then if we allow the cars to be a bit more powerful than you would expect otherwise, it should be exciting. And if people do, let's say have an accident in their Twin Spark or something goes wrong that's going to be a significant investment, that rather than not doing it or deciding to go somewhere else, they might say, well, let's do a Giulietta because, I'll be sort of 4 or 5 seconds up the road in a very similarly priced car.
Yeah.
So, yeah, the development's been good.
And the spec, as I understand it, is Giulietta or Mito. If I was a competitor looking at it, what are the pros and cons of going one route rather than the other?
At the moment, it's not so obvious. Once we have the electronics finally sorted, which is the biggest headache at the moment that we're having, we're hoping that we can talk with Dave Faithful and Dave Petty and actually go and do a couple of days together, where we can actually then test the cars back to back, because the Mito it's a fair chunk lighter. But then suspension wise, it's not as sophisticated as what the Giulietta has. So there will be pros and cons with both, and that may change the spec at the end as to how we do it in terms of maybe allowing things with the Giulietta to bring it closer to the Mito weight, making the Mito run heavier so it's closer to the Giulietta. Ultimately, they'll have the same power, engines, exhaust, all that sort of thing. But until we get them back to back, it's hard to say. I mean, on paper, I would say that the Giulietta would probably be the better option of the two. But as I said, until they're actually at the same circuit on the same day, at the same spec.
With the same drivers,
with the same drivers, we're not too sure. I mean, certainly...
And I guess some of the differences will be circuit-specific as well, because the shorter wheelbase on the Mito will help some places. The wider track on the Giulietta will help elsewhere.
Sure, and we see that in the Twin Spark Cup now, that although there's not much difference between them, there's certain circuits that they are benefited by, depending on the car you're in. But again, that's something that once we do go and test the cars back to back and understand exactly what's going on, we can then make the tweaks, at that stage, so that there's just much less guesswork at any point going forwards. We'll be able to sit down and say, this car has this strength, this car has that strength. We've tried to level that off by doing this or doing that. I mean, certainly, the Twin Spark Cup, there is a weight difference between the 145, 146 GTV than there is compared to a 156 or 147.
Yeah.
But it's, as far as I know, it's never actually been tested, in a controlled environment, i.e. the same man drives all the cars around the same circuit to understand actually if the weight difference is fair.
Yeah.
But before we go kind of live, if you like, with a set of rules, we would like to achieve that with the Mito and the Giulietta, just so that we know and we have an understanding, of exactly where the cars sit. So there's just a little bit of science applied to it, so that it's fair and it's equal. And then if you have a choice of car, you pick the model that you like. Someone like David Faithful, for example, would probably never be seen in the Giulietta. He's Mito through and through.
He does have a bit of a fixation with the unnecessary rear doors on the Giulietta.
Well, there you go. So it's, being able to ensure that if he wants to maintain that standpoint, that his car, is competitive to a Giulietta and vice versa, it allows a scope. It opens up the class to quite a huge amount of cars that could be available to do it. So on paper, in theory, it should be good. It's just getting those final bits across the line. But development-wise, we're 90% the way there now. There's just the final bits of the electronics in terms of, the driver aids not interfering when they shouldn't, and ironing out the suspension spec. And then I would be quite confident in saying, from a Giulietta standpoint, we've got Dave's specification. Here's the Giulietta one. Let's go and have a test day and see actually where they all stand.
So the plan presumably is to have that class in place for 2023. Is that right?
Or is that ambitious? It would be in place for this year. Right. No, I was hoping it would be this year, but you just had a lot going on and trying to get all the bits. It's ended up developing to be a bit more complicated than what we hoped for, and certainly from what I was thinking of a build spec, it's developed like the wishbones. Dave Petty has done some really nice wishbones for the Mitos, which I personally was of the opinion that I don't think the cars should have wishbones that are non-standard. But as we've built the Giulietta and run the Giulietta, it's become apparent that they're really actually quite awful on track with the amount of camber that you can put into them.
Right.
They're okay. Sorry, saying awful was a bit strong, but the difference in terms of how the tyre performs, how the wear of the tyre happens, how the car handles, if you can just give it another couple of degrees of camber, it means the tyres will last longer. The car will be more exciting to drive, faster lap times. So I've changed my opinion on that. So that's why we've gone through a couple of designs of wishbone, again, to make them either completely adjustable or not so adjustable.
Yeah, I was just going to say, in terms of timescale, it's difficult to be clear at this point. In the meantime, of course, they're all eligible to go into the Power Trophy.
That was going to be my next question. If we're 90% there, are we likely to see a development car run in the championship this season?
From our point of view, absolutely. We're hoping to have the second car ready by the first race. It'll just be subject to the company if they get the suspension finished in time. If not, we actually have a spare set of suspension, but the car is, other than that, it's pretty much ready to go. And so we've been dangling a carrot to our existing drivers for testing the Giulietta. And what we hope to achieve, throughout the year is have at least one, if not two, on the grid as often as possible. One with, existing drivers, trying it for comparison. I'm going to try and race one of them, as often as it allows, just because I think if people see the cars out there, they see the sort of lap times they do, they're actually a pretty good car. They look good. It may well attract attention. We know certainly from our social media that we're getting a lot of following from people that own the cars. And we get quite regular emails with people saying that, it's brilliant. They're really pleased that someone's doing it and that they've got interest. And so far we've had 4 existing drivers drive the car. We've got another 2 that have contacted us saying that, if the opportunity's there, they'd like to have a go. So in amongst existing people, there certainly appears to be interest for doing it. So what we'd like to see if we can do is, throughout the season, let those people have go in one of the cars so that, there is 1 or 2 out. Hopefully David might be able to get the Mito out. So, by the end of the season, there could be half a dozen. Certainly once the roll cages start coming through from Dave, it's quite a quick, simple exercise actually to convert them to a race car. And as I said, we do have 7 that we've got parked up, in line, ready to go. So if we can get them and get them out, then we might be sitting here at the start of 23 saying, let's make the class a reality and its own thing. But at the moment, as Andy says, that they can go in the in the Power Trophy, and that's kind of what we're doing. And once there is enough, then look at how we deal with that going forwards.
I was chatting to one of the Twin Spark Cup drivers who tried one at Silverstone. He was very impressed and would very much like to prolong the experience.
Well, that's good.
Well, I don't know if you listen to our International Women's Day podcast, but Jade Pidgley, who's the secretary of the new Alpha Females section.
Oh yes.
She's been talking to David Faithful, and I think she's in the process of getting an ARDS license and is keen to get out in the Mito at some point. So
that'd be great. That'd be super
fantastic. That would be brilliant to see. a couple of Mitos, a couple of Giuliettas on the grid. I think it's a good statement for the championship going forwards, and it would just be great, to have a few of them out there and people enjoying them and seeing what the future looks like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And there's quite a pipeline in the workshop from what you were saying before we started the recording. 7 that you've got lined up to build.
Yeah, so we don't necessarily have people for them yet.
Yep.
But we've actually bought 7 cars, most of them white, because we're hoping that they'll all have Bianco over them, and that suits our colour scheme. But that might not be the case. But yeah, we do have 7 cars. Where I'm sitting now doing the interview, I'm sitting in our lorry, and we've got 2 on the back of it that are just sitting there. They're ready to go, and as soon as we can get the suspension lined up, the roll cages from Dave, then we're going to put them together and start putting them out. And from talking to people, I think that there's a good chance that a few of them will move this year. So we're just gonna build them and get cracking. But the beauty of it is that if you email the championship, you ask for a build kit. If you're mechanically minded, and I don't mean a mechanic by that, but mechanically minded, it's all designed in a way where everything, it should be unbolt the old bits off of the car and bolt the new bits on, and you can kind of do it almost in a weekend, in your garage at home.
And is there a target price for that build kit?
Somewhere, where every time I think about it, it goes up. But it's somewhere between sort of £5,000 and £7,000, depending on the final cost for the suspension, whether people want their spoilers and bits and pieces. But yeah, somewhere between 5 and 7. And when we look across the board at other championships do say you can go racing for less than that, which you can do if you buy their spec. But if you buy the spec that allows you to go for less than that, then you're going to drive around at the back on your own. Yeah. Because what they say is, you can build a race car for, say, £3,500 of parts, but that doesn't include any of the bits that actually make the car, keep up with everybody else.
It's all the same.
So I'm kind of being more open and saying, look, every part to build the car it's going to be somewhere between £5,000 and £7,000, and that's it. There's no other bits you can add to it. You need all of those bits to actually drive the car, and it should be good. At the moment with the Twin Spark Cup, if you wanted to build one to the absolute maximum of everything, you could be looking at £25,000. It wouldn't necessarily make you any quicker than one that's much cheaper, but it
would take away some of the excuses for being slower.
Yeah, well, absolutely. But yeah, the bonus is, you pick up the phone, the roll cage that you fit in the car it's kind of £1,300 to £1,400, including the VAT. All the cars will have the same roll cage. All the cars run the same diff. A lot of the bits you'll be able to swap over. They're not sort of single time use. The reason why we've done the roll cages we have is that if someone has a big accident at the moment, it's a whole complete new build, to get them back on the grid. Whereas, if they have a big front end shunt, they can just take the roll cage out. All they've got to do is buy a new set of feet, which is probably £80, weld those back into the new shell, put the roll cage back in, and off they go. And, for a couple of £100, they're back on the grid. Yeah. That's why we've done it as it is. So, yeah, it should be good. It should be brilliant. I'm hoping that there's, by the end of the year, there's maybe 4 or 5 across the Mito and Giulietta. It'll be a great, a great thing for the championship.
Yes, I agree. It'll be fabulous. And it's something, it's credit and thanks to Paul for doing the development work. Obviously, if the Alfa Romeo factory had agreed to build, 25 of these, hand them over, that would have been wonderful. But that's not reality, of course. So it's certainly the vision we've had for 2 or 3 years now, and it's great to see it starting to drop into place.
Yeah. And I hear one of your Giuliettas is going to take on a similar look to your virtual racing Giulietta TCR car.
Yes, it absolutely is. The one that hopefully in the next week or 2 that we'll start sharing pictures with on social media. The virtual TCR car that I think it was Andy that did the design on it at the time, I grew quite fond of and quite liked. So as a kind of appreciation to him, the first one that's going to be in the Bianco colours, we've literally replicated it as far as we can with, in terms of the sponsor parameters that we have. So it'll look, very similar, as a thank you to him for his efforts in making the car look good on virtual racing.
Brilliant. What we'll have to do once you've got the spec finalised is we'll have to try and create a mod for Assetto Corsa that's as close as we can get to the Mito and Giulietta spec. We've got one in Dave Faithfull's livery, which I think has the right amount of power, but is effectively just a Mito QV road car in terms of the physics. But it'd be nice to run a parallel series where we're actually running the same spec as the cars you're running.
I think that would be cool because it would add a new dimension, certainly to people Colin's a prime example. If they are doing the driving in the sim, and there's a series of driving the exact cars that actually you could then go and get in and drive around a real racetrack, and maybe that could, if that was the case, lean itself to doing another championship with another opportunity. It is provided to somebody like Colin, because it, as I said in the previous podcast, it certainly showed, actually how good Colin is, not only online, but being able to transfer that into a car. It was quite remarkable to see. So having a link up where you could actually drive the same car as you are driving on the online sim, I think that'd be pretty cool.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
we'll have to start our development now.
I think it'd be a bit cheaper for you, though.
Yeah, I think it probably would. Yeah, and the kit would be much cheaper because you just have to go and download it.
I should just say, just to add, that in terms of other new cars, Revs Italia have another V6 156 GTA very close to completion. Doesn't have a driver yet, so if anybody is expressing an interest, there's a potential car waiting.
Did Roger ever manage to sell his ineligible for the new Giulietta series Giulietta?
It's up for sale again. He did advertise it a while back, then he took it off the market, but it went back on eBay last week for $35,000, I think.
That's almost exactly the price that a Giulietta Quadrifoglio was new, fully spec'd up. I remember when it was launched, going onto the online configurator and thinking 35 grand is quite a lot of money for a hatchback.
It is.
But for Roger's hatchback, that seems like a bit of a bargain.
If only the spec was the same.
Yes.
Absolutely. Yeah. And any other of the interesting cars? We saw a few cars last year that I think we only saw once. The white and red 147 Cup car.
Colin Saab. Yeah, he's registered. He wants to do as many races as he can that don't clash with his Ferrari racing.
So presumably he'll be doing Anglesey.
He'll be doing Anglesey, and he's hoping to do a couple of others as well. So that would be... I've had an exchange of messages with him. He's very keen, but I suppose he races two or three different Ferraris as well.
Yes.
So, but yes, he's hoping to do as many as he can fit in, basically.
Brilliant. Cool. Well, I look forward to seeing you all in person in a couple of weeks' time at Silverstone.
Yeah, likewise.
Hopefully the weather will be decent and we'll get a good day's racing.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Looking forward to it.
Yep.
It's always exciting at the start of the season.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Paul. That's all we have time for this week. We'll be back in 2 weeks' time on Sunday the 24th of April. That's also the day of our first big event of the year, Spring Alpha Day at Burley House near Stamford in Lincolnshire. Entrance is by advance ticket only, and tickets are on sale now on the club's website at www.aroc-uk.com. Episode 56 will be available to download at 1:30, so you can download it from the club's website, Podbean, YouTube, Podcast Addict, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts while you're at Spring Alpha Day, and listen to it on the way home. Until then, stay safe.